חולי, שערי צדק, אבובם, אודיה, פיתחו לי, שערי צדק, אבובם, אודיה, פיתחו לי, שערי צדק, אבובם, אודיה, פיתחו לי, שערי צדק, אבובם, Odea. Open up, the gates of justice, I will enter, I will praise your name, Open up, the gates of justice, I will enter, I will praise your name, Pitruli, Shari Tzedek,
gates of justice,
Avovam,
I will enter,
Odea,
I will praise your name,
Pitruli,
open up,
Shari Tzedek,
gates of justice,
Avovam,
I will enter,
Odea. Well, there's a long list of things gone wrong, too many to fit in one song. The list goes on and on and on and on. Well, it's enough to make you constantly stressed. Can't see a way out of this mess. Enough to make you walk away. But something inside's just got to say, we don't have to beg or plead or even wring our hands.
We can organize,
Mobilize, make demands.
The world we want is ours to create. So let's do it now. No time to wait. Shari Tzedek,
Gates of justice,
Avovam,
I will enter,
Odea,
I praise your name.
Pitruli.
Hello, everyone. Welcome this evening. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our webinar as part of our Raising Up Teens with Moving Traditions webinar series, talking with teens on reproductive rights and sexual health. I'm Alicia Pedowitz. I'm the Director of Teen Education at Los Angeles, at Moving Traditions, and I'm in Los Angeles. And tonight, we are going to be hearing from a wide variety of voices on a really important topic that reflects one of the things that's most important to what we do at Moving Traditions, which is supporting teens in the pursuit of shleimut, personal wholeness, chesed, kind and caring connections, and tzedek, the pursuit of justice in the world. All of the programs that we run are about these three core Jewish values as outcomes, and as we'll be discussing tonight, these are obviously deeply intertwined with the issue of abortion access, reproductive rights, and the sexual health of teens. I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Tamara Cohen.
Thank you, Alicia. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with all of you. It's been a hard few weeks. Even though we knew this was coming, it still has felt like a time of grief and rage, and sometimes like we're not sure what to do. And so I'm really grateful that we're here tonight to be led first by teens and then by expert activists in different and overlapping fields to help us find even more than we have the ways that we need to move forward, whether we are parents or grandparents or people who are caring about young people, caring about our own rights as women, as LGBTQ people, as Jews, and as citizens. And so, as Alicia said, part of what Moving Traditions does is also really help make the connections. There are people right now and articles you'll read talking about the wellness, the well-being, or the mental health challenges facing teens. And there's other people talking and organizing around the challenges to the well-being of our democracy and our country. And there's other people talking about what's going on in the Jewish world. And we kind of try to bring all those together and say, hey, wait a second, we need to see the intersections between these things. Our teens need it. And that's what it means to do the work of being a Jewish educator, a Jewish activist, a Jewish parent or grandparent, and anyone in our community. It's helping make those connections, helping figure out how we speak out in rage, in comfort, offering comfort, offering our rage, and trying to continue to make a difference, even when we feel that it's overwhelming to recognize people who want to take away our rights and the rights of the most vulnerable who are already have already been under threat in terms of their health. And so we're going to start tonight with the teens, because that's how we started Moving Traditions, always by keeping teen voices at the center. And then zoom out, if you will, from there to bring into our circle some other important voices, which is also what we do when we work with teens, and try to hear some Jewish voices, some voices in terms of healthy sexuality, voices in terms of advocacy, voices in terms of thinking about intersectionality and the impact of a moment like this, specifically on people of color. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Alicia, and to Aviva and Hannah.
Thank you, Tamara. And I want to welcome both Aviva and if we can bring Hannah onto the spotlight as well. Aviva Mitchell and Hannah Colason-Zeldis were both members of our Meyer Gottesman Kol Kolinu Teen Feminist Fellowship this past year. It is one of our programs, one of our many programs for teens, but this one in particular brings together feminist teens of all genders from across the country to engage with matters of the pursuit of societal wholeness and justice through an intersectional feminist lens. And each fellow, either individually or in partnership with another fellow, creates a social change project for the change they want to see in their communities and in the world. So Hannah and Aviva, I am so honored to have you join us. Your particular work that you have each done relates to what we are here to talk about tonight. So it made sense when we were thinking about who we wanted on this panel, the two of you, to share with us the work that you're doing, why you're doing it. So I want to first turn to Hannah. Hannah, as I said before, you were a Kol Kolinu Fellow this past year and a rising high school senior in San Diego, California. You have already done an impressive amount of organizing. And in the wake of the Dobbs decision, you organized a group of over 100 people into a group called We Are the Resistance. We're going to share the link in the chat to the Instagram page for this group if you're interested in joining their work. And through We Are the Resistance have mobilized multiple efforts in the pursuit of abortion access and reproductive rights. So I'd love for you to share with us what motivated you to form this group and the work that you are doing within it.
Right. Well, as someone who has an incredibly powerful mom, she's a human rights lawyer, and I believe she's actually on here right now. So shout out to Helen Zeldis. But I just turned to her and I said, I actually want to do something. because a lot of us were so angry. We're just sitting in bed and upset about this, mourning it, and not doing any action towards it. So what I wanted to do was not be complicit to what's going on around us. And as a teen who can't vote, I have friends who can. So we were working on doing some teen voter drives for kids who are turning 18, because there's over 4 million teens. That's right, 4 million that will be able to vote in the next election. That could really make a huge difference right now. And on top of that, we're also working to spread awareness, create events, and organize and actually come together and fight for this as one.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And so if people want to join in those efforts, mobilizing teens to vote so that their voices, their powerful voices, become very much heard in the next election, they can join you right on Instagram. And there are other ways to get involved with We Are the Resistance. So you'll see that on their Instagram account. Thank you. And on that note, I'm just going to say we're going to be sharing a variety of links throughout the evening to the different work and things that our panelists are mentioning. We will also be sharing that out in an email in the couple of days following tonight's webinar. So don't feel you have to keep track of all of them from the chat tonight. I'm going to turn now to Aviva, also a rising high school senior in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and a Colcolino Fellow this past year. Aviva, your fellowship project was to create and sell uterus-shaped earrings and donate all of the proceeds to the Midwest Action Coalition. I would love for you to share with us why you think it's important to support the Midwest Action Coalition and why funds like that matter. Access Coalition, my apologies.
Yeah. So over the past year and a half, my mom has been teaching me how to make jewelry. Also, shout out to my mom who's on here. Mostly earrings, and we sell them on our Etsy page. And so something I've been trying to do this past year is focus on the things that are in my scope of control. And this is really hard for me and a lot of people because there's all these huge problems that we look at from the big picture, and we can't, when we look at it that way, there's not much we can do about it. But when we look at what we can do in our small, like for me, I'm creative. As I said, I like to make jewelry, and I decided that I would make earrings, my uterus earrings, and sell them and donate all of the profits to the Midwest Access Coalition, which is a nonprofit that supports Midwesterners who need to travel in order to receive a safe and legal abortion. They cover expenses like food, medication, emotional care, childcare. They coordinate travel, costs of gas, and so many other supports. They don't cover the cost of the actual abortion procedure, but they cover most of the other things that you will need in order to receive a safe and legal abortion. Those things are often neglected when discussing the costs and excess of abortion care. So since I live in Michigan and I enjoy making and selling jewelry, and I'm not personally in need of keeping the profits from my earrings, this is the perfect project for me. My hope is that the money that I donate from this project can maybe fund someone's gas if they need to travel to another state, or help them get groceries for their weekend, or whatever it is. I know that this small project that I can do will directly help someone, because I'm 17 and I can't vote, and there's a lot of things that I can't do that I wish I could do, but I enjoy being creative, and this is something that I can do that's in the scope of my control. And MAC, the Midwest Access Coalition, is a nonprofit that, helps people, and it helps people with things that they are like the most important parts of getting an abortion, with the laws like this, like they need to travel. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Aviva. And thank you for using your creativity and your art to raise awareness about something that's so important. We've also pasted the link to the chat in the link chat, my goodness, to Aviva's Etsy store, but also the Midwest Action Coalition will also be sharing more information about various other local abortion funds. Thank you, Aviva, for highlighting why local abortion funds are so important, right? You named many of the various things that can serve as additional barriers for someone when they are seeking abortion. Transportation, how far away it is, if they have to go to another state, right? The actual funds for the procedure itself, support before and after. This is why the more access is limited, the more and more barriers from various intersecting realities end up making it harder and harder. And these local funds look at the people in whatever local community, what their barriers likely are, and make sure that money is available for them every step of the way. So thank you for highlighting that for us. And I just want to say what you're each doing really, I saw in the chat some things about inspiration, feeling inspired and having hope. And for me, I just want to highlight something that you each said about having a moment really feeling powerless, right? Feeling the feelings you're feeling, angry. This does impact you and other people in very real ways. And what you have chosen to do with that is to find ways to help make change, right? And this is something we talk a lot about in the Kol Kolenu Fellowship, deeply Jewish value of from Pirkei Avot. It is not up to you to complete the work, and neither are you free to desist from it. This is a very feminist idea that it takes each of us and it takes all of us. And thank you, even in this moment of great despair over the enormity of this decision, knowing that each one of us can come together and find ways to make a difference. So thank you for that inspiration. And before we turn it over to some of the other panelists, I would like to ask each of you if you would be willing to share with us one or two things that you think is important for adults to either understand or to do right now to support teens and young people. And we'll start with you, Hannah.
I just say be very open to conversations about sexual health and reproductive health, and also be accepting of topics that might feel uncomfortable.
Thank you. And hopefully throughout the course of this evening, we'll give parents, adults, all of you listening, some tangible ways to do exactly that, to have the conversations that may otherwise feel uncomfortable. How about you, Aviva?
Yeah, I think that parents need to be understanding of the fact that right now, Hannah and I's generation have less rights and protections relating to our bodies than our moms did. And that's a really crazy thing to think about, because we're supposed to be moving forward. And it's sort of really hard to grapple with that, you know, we have less rights than our moms did. And I think our parents need to be aware of that, and they need to be open to thinking about how their teenage experience is a lot different than ours is, you know, in a lot of ways, but also in this way. And so some things that some of my friends' parents are doing is purchasing Plan B and emergency contraception and putting it in the bathroom, just to show that they're like willing to support their children. And something that my mom has been doing is making sure that she vocally tells me that, like, if something were to happen, she'd be there for me and my friends. And I think our parents just need to have some empathy for us. It's difficult for everyone, but it's especially hard for those of us under 18 and under 21, because there's additional boundaries and additional obstacles that we have to work around. So
thank you both. We're going to be bringing Aviva and Hannah back again near the end of the panel. Thank you for opening up this important conversation and giving us some really tangible things that we can do. I am now honored to welcome Dina Robinson to the conversation. As Aviva put out, right, in her as she was sharing about the importance of the Midwest Access Coalition. Really, depending on where people live in this country right now, the landscape of what rights teens do have changes based on what state, what county they live in. And in order for parents and adults to be advocates and allies for their kids, they also need to understand that legal landscape and how it's changing. Which is why, again, we're lucky to have Dina Robinson, a civil rights attorney and a DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion facilitator, who currently works as a trial attorney in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, and in her past has done extensive work lawyering for reproductive justice. So Dina, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'd love for you to share with us some of the top things you think adults need to understand about the legal landscape of reproductive rights and how it impacts what they might need to consider in supporting and advocating for their teens.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would just say, as we all know, oh, sorry about that. I'm having these random notifications go off on my computer. As we all know, after Dobbs overturned Roe versus Wade, there were 13 states that had trigger laws that immediately went into effect. Those states were Arkansas, Idaho, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wyoming. And for folks who don't know, the trigger laws essentially had abortion bans on the books that would have gone into effect if Roe versus Wade was ever overturned. We know that overturning Roe versus Wade was part of the long-term plan for conservatives and the right that they've been working towards for basically the past 50 years. And so when Dobbs came down, those bans went into effect. And so what we saw almost within a week were the only abortion clinic, for example, in Mississippi, shut down. And is now moving to New Mexico, which means that young people in states like Mississippi or in a state like Texas need to travel several states away just to access abortion-related services, and sometimes even reproductive health care. So that's one thing to know. I think another thing to know that comes to mind for me with a lot of the rhetoric I've heard since the Dobbs decision came down is that we can't turn our backs on communities or people who live in the Deep South. Right after the decision came down and all of the abortion bans came out, I heard people saying, oh, we should just give up on the South. They're so backwards. But what we forget when we say that is that a majority of Black people actually live in the Deep South in this country. The majority of us do not live in New York or California. We live in states like Louisiana and Mississippi and Missouri, where these abortion bans have gone into effect. So that's one thing I would say. Another thing I would note is a lot of folks have a tendency right now to try to hoard as much Plan B as they can, to order abortion pills. Don't do it. Don't hoard it in your house. I know that we want to do it because we want to have that protection for our own young people. But one of the things we need to remember is that there are organizations and there are even abortion funds that actually already will take abortion pills and hand them out to people. So there are services that are doing that currently. So you don't need to hoard the abortion pills, because for those of us who live on the East or West Coast, the majority of us are going to be okay. We are going to be able to access abortion services. We'll be able to drive to an abortion clinic. But for people who are living in what essentially has become the middle of the country, and almost half of the country at this point, they're the ones who are going to need the abortion pills. They're the ones who are going to need you to donate to abortion funds so that they can get from, a state like Mississippi to New Mexico, or get from Mississippi to California, or to the closest state that has abortion related services. And the other thing I would say finally is that you're right that the legal landscape is shifting every single day. It's hard to keep up with. And I don't even work in reproductive rights as an attorney anymore. But when I talk to my friends who do, they're like, it's like whiplash. All of the laws are changing. Texas is currently suing the Biden administration right now because there are some federal provisions in place that would protect, provide abortion related services to protect the life of a mother, because we're still using that gendered language, and they're suing. So even in a state like Texas, you have that. You have other states where you might be criminalized, and punished and arrested if you aid or abet an abortion. So I would encourage you, if you can, to at least try to brush up on what the law is in your state, if you live in one of the now 26 states that don't have access to abortion or have limited access to abortion.
Thank you, Dina. So the importance of knowing where you live, what the actual legal rights and ramifications are, so you can make decisions about how you want to, what potential consequences and the different actions that you can take. And I also really appreciate, as a parent of teenagers living in Los Angeles, California, right? I was actually wondering some of the same of like, I do want to make sure, Plan B, and access to that is so important. I want to make sure young people know that, but are the kids that I know going to be the most at risk? And how do I make sure that that's available to the teens who might need it? So I guess, again, the importance of those local abortion funds to do that. And I do thank you. And you mentioned a bit about, we're still using the gendered language of mothers, et cetera. And I was wondering if you can also talk a bit about what adults need to understand in terms of what is different right now and how we talk about things in a way that will be helpful for the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, so and I think this is a function of where this country was when we started having conversations about abortion, right? 50 years ago, abortion was considered a women's issue. And times have changed. We know now that there are LGBTQ people. We recognize that there are trans people, there are non-binary folks. And trans folks and non-binary folks also have abortions. And we tend to have very limiting and reductive conversations about abortion access. And the minute that the Dobbs decision came down, I knew that the narrative was again going to be the right of women to access abortion has been taken away. This is 50 years of a woman's right to choose, and now that's gone. And I knew that it would be reductive for trans and non-binary folks. And, it goes hand in hand when you think about the fact that over the course of this year alone, there have been almost 500 anti-trans bills passed or sponsored in state legislatures across the country aimed at young trans and non-binary kids. And so when we reduce abortion to just being a women's issue and we center it around the gender binary, we miss a whole population that is going to be impacted by this decision. And when you don't measure or count the people who are going to be impacted, you can't do anything to help them. You can't do anything to bring them into the fold. So that's one thing to recognize, that the way that you may have conceived of abortion when you were my age, which is 31, or when you were younger, is not the way that young people are thinking about abortion access right now. I think young people know that women are not the only people who need abortions.
And I thank you for bringing that up. Our last parent webinar, which we have links to on our website, actually really looked at gender and the expansive gender identities, and understanding how that what that means for young people today, so that we can be caught up in talking about it. And this is a perfect example of the intersection of those identities. And I will just say, as a parent of a trans teenager, all of the things you mentioned, thank you. We need to be deeply aware of how we are talking about these things for that reason. Thank you so much, Gina. I know there's more you can add to this conversation, but I'm going to turn it back over to Tamara.
Thank you so much, Dina. and Aviva and Hannah. It's my pleasure now to bring into the conversation my colleague and longtime co-conspirator and friend, Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg. It was clear when we realized that we were going to need to do this summer that you would be here. You have written about Judaism and sexuality. You have written about parenting. And you have been such an outspoken leader and advocate, along with all of NCJW, in this struggle before and continuing now. So thank you for being here with us. And thank you for bringing in for us how it is that we stand in this moment, specifically as Jews, and help our teens who are in conversations in, multi-religious settings, feel some Jewish confidence and pride in this moment and in this movement.
Thank you for having me, first of all. And I want to say really, really clearly, abortion is permitted in Judaism, and it is sometimes required when the life and health of the pregnant person is at stake. It is required according to Jewish law. So we see from the Torah, from the book of Exodus, through the Mishnah, it was like ancient rabbinic teachings, through the Talmud, and then into Jewish law, we see, I could go through, text after text after text. I just actually did earlier today. I spent an hour going through just a few of our foundational texts to talk about, to make the case, to explain how Judaism permits abortion. There is not a question. Abortion access is a Jewish value. So these laws, I need to say that the destruction of Roe and all of these abortion bans are a violation of not only the 14th Amendment, which it is, and we always need to situate abortion bans in the context of white supremacy, right? The 14th Amendment was a post-Reconstruction amendment, and it is not an accident that it is tied, that the freedom to create families and to have autonomy over one's body is connected to the 14th Amendment in the liberation of enslaved people and autonomy and freedom to create families as needed, right? There's a reason that that's part of the 14th Amendment. And there are reasons why the anti-abortion movement pivoted after they lost school segregation, right? We always need to name this in the context of white supremacy, but we need to know that these bans are a violation of the First Amendment also, of our ability to practice Judaism as we understand it, and to not have laws based on somebody else's idea about when life begins that isn't our own. So abortion access is a Jewish value, and words matter. And so we need to get comfortable saying the word abortion, right? Abortion is healthcare. It's a medical procedure. It's a medical procedure that our tradition understands and accepts, embraces, knows that is part of a necessary part of human dignity and autonomy sometimes, and health and safety, emotional health, spiritual health, mental health. So parents and grandparents, everybody who is in the life of teenagers, you need to be comfortable saying the word abortion, right? Not mumbling it, not using a euphemism, because that's part of how you can get comfortable talking to the teenagers in your life, and to let them know that you have their back and that they can be there for anything, any choices or situations or questions or conundrums that they might need down the line when they're going to come talk to you. Right? That's part of destigmatizing and saying it's, there's going to be no shame, no fear, right? When we destigmatize the concept of abortion and we take that fear out of it and we say this is a medical procedure that is completely permitted and kosher in our tradition, then we've removed all sorts of things from the room, right? Suddenly it's okay, it's speakable in the way that I think many families are much more comfortable about talking about being gay than they were 30 years ago, right?
Sure, because you're right. All of these things are connected, and I appreciate the way that you're connecting them, both in terms of Judaism's approach to sexuality in a bigger way than just abortion, being different than a Christian evangelical idea of sexuality and sin. And I think for us at Moving Traditions, the idea of mistakes being part of adolescence and something that we actually encourage our young people to take risks and to be okay with making mistakes and not to feel like we need to be perfect. And then also making the connections between the rise of white supremacy and the impact on that on Jews, Jews of color and white Jews who have perhaps felt a certain kind of safety that I know I started to really feel differently about in these last weeks, just recognizing how the agenda is one that is both anti-Black and anti-poor people and anti-women and anti-LGBT and anti-Semitic in that way. So saying abortion, important, without shame, talking about the connections and the history of these movements. What else? What else do you have to say to adults and parents today?
I think, I think Hannah and Aviva started to talk about this, and I want to just triple underscore this from a pastoral point of view. You should listen to them because they're smarter than me, but I'll say it anyway. Sometimes you got to hear it more than once. This is devastating, and the impact on people who are teenagers now is profound and it cannot be compared to anything that any of us went through. And for people who are coming of age sexually now, knowing that it's going to take us many years to undo the damage of now, right? This is a long fight. And during the time when getting pregnant when you don't want to be pregnant may be, at highest stakes for the teenagers in your lives. This is real, and the grief and fear and trauma of this time is real. And please acknowledge and validate your teenagers' feelings as real, and know that 1 in 4 people who can get pregnant will have an abortion by the age of 45, right? Abortion is common. It happens in all of our communities. And so if your teenager is one of them, one of the people who needs this medical procedure, they are in good company. Everybody loves someone who had an abortion, whether you know it or not. So you need to talk to your teenagers about birth control, about abortion, about Plan B, which is something that which is a pill that can be taken within 120 hours, I believe, after sex, if there was something unprotected or a question or a condom broke or something, to prevent the release of an egg. Plan C, which is medication abortion, which is can be taken up to 10 weeks gestation. PlanCpills.org is a great address for that. But obviously also not assuming heteronormative sexual experiences, right? Or sexual interest or desire, right? To talk to your teens about sexuality and all of the feelings, but with open questions while making sure that everybody knows all of the stuff.
Thank you.
As everybody should be educated, and be, and some of this is your own emotional processing about your, that your baby is growing into a fully functioning person who may who may and likely will have sex at some point, and they need to be equipped with the tools. And they need your support.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Rettenberg. And as we think about our kids, one of the people that has helped me think about this so much, and is so wonderful at talking to parents and teens about it, is Karis Dennison. I'm going to bring her and Alicia back in to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Rabbi Rettenberg and Tamara. And as Tamara said, Karis Dennison, I have learned from you as a sexuality educator in ways to feel comfortable talking about uncomfortable things with the teens in my life. And I just want to kind of harken back to something that Hannah said at the start of all of this, of the importance of parents and adults, because also educators, being open to conversation, having these conversations. And I know that it can be really hard and uncomfortable. So I'm excited to invite you, Karis, who is a youth advocate, a teacher, an expert in human development, ethics, and social justice. Karis has consulted with us at Moving Traditions on the development of our own healthy sexuality curricula, and she works with teens, educators, parents around the country through her consulting business. Karis, what do you think is the most important thing for parents of teens to know right now about having conversations?
Well, I think that, Hannah and Aviva nailed it, of course. If we just got out of the way and let, teens speak more, which is what Moving Traditions does, I think we'd be a lot further along in this. So I want to thank them for that, because, Hannah talked about being open to conversation, and that doesn't mean having conversations. That she said open. That's a really key and word. And then Aviva talked about to be aware that our experience is different than our children's in many ways, but just that idea of being seen. Teens are in one of the most important times of their life, and they have little to no rights, and we just took another one away from them. So the more we can give them the spotlight. A couple of my main points is that I've been talking with teens for 30 years around issues of social justice and reproductive rights, and not talking about not talking to your child about this subject is not protecting them. It is not in any way making them feel safe. It is our own fear that we're projecting, or us trying to control. So, and that these conversations are essential, and that they need to be normalized, which was already said so beautifully, normalized and non-judgmental. And that's a challenge, but that's no excuse. We need to practice. And I think those conversations, for just rule of thumbs that are helpful, is to try to ask more questions than answers. Just ask what this experience is like for your teen. We don't have to have all the answers. We can't understand what it's like to be a teen right now, but we can see them. And so I think that if they feel seen, that'll move us forward. Also, I also have a 3-to-1 ratio that I tell parents. For every 3 minutes your teen speak for 1, or adjust that ratio according to how much your teen speaks or doesn't speak. But your voice is important, but it is not essential. Your child's voice is essential, and they need practice and space to practice that. And the other is to allow yourself to be surprised by the insight and the wisdom and the courage that comes out of their mouths and from their hearts. If you give them the space, it's just like I'm inspired 100 times a day, either in my classroom or one-on-one. The other thing is to try not to, as we call, don't should on your child. If you should on them, you're actually taking power away from them rather than providing it. And teens should on themselves enough. We don't need to do it for them. And it's okay, right, for us to model our own fear and frustration. If we don't do that, then teens have they need to see what that looks like in a way that doesn't make them just want to drop off the face of the earth right now, right? So if we can just role model that, yeah, that we're uncomfortable with the conversation maybe, but we're also frustrated or scared, we're not going to incite drama or trauma in our child by naming the fact that this is a really horrible, challenging situation. But by naming it, right, we're able to tackle it. The other thing is that, a reminder that when you're thinking about working with or talking with your teens is that sexuality, it's not just about sex at all, right? I didn't lie in bed when I was 10 and say, someday I want to be a sex educator. Like, I mean, that's weird. But I did know that I was in love with the teen population, and you can't represent and help teens have a voice and teach social justice without being an expert on sexuality. And so it's just this idea to remind us that we're trying to allow our teens to find autonomy and power and to be a subject of their own story rather than an object. And this reversal of Roe hugely impacts that whole equation. And we have to allow ourselves to know that while we're trying to teach this awareness of power and autonomy and agency, an enormous part of our population has just been objectified rather than allowed to be seen as a subject. And we need to rally around that and deal with it. One thing that I find, as I'm busy screwing up two of my own teenagers, and what I try to remind us all is that there's one mantra that I know that every choice that a teenager is making or action, they're after one or all three of these three things. They want to feel safe, seen, and significant. It is self-care, and it's an enormously healthy equation, and we need, and it's our responsibility, right, to help them achieve that. So if we were to apply this idea of allowing our teens to feel safe, seen, and significant in this equation around Roe, we can allow them to feel safe, that we're holding this space for them, that it's hard and we're here, and to feel seen, that this is incredibly challenging, to not minimize it or should and say, well, we should be happy for, no, but to be able to see them in this discomfort.
Thank you. Karis, I think that last piece, sticking with me in my head, walking out of here, safe, seen, and significant, also makes it, in some ways, at least for me, like my job going into conversations, right, with the teens, the young people in my life, might not be to have all the answers. It's to open the space for conversation, to prepare myself to be a little uncomfortable. But if I can just do that, like, hey, you have safety to talk about whatever it is that you need to talk about. Exactly. I see you, I hear you, I'm going to listen to what you have to say. And then I'm going to do whatever I can that I hear from you that you need to feel like you are significant, you have power. And thank you for naming that. This was something was mentioned early on by Aviva and Hannah, right? The feeling of powerlessness, something that has been done to us that we don't have power over. Yeah. And that is very much what, as you said, sexuality is truly about. Thank you for reminding us of all of that. Again, there's with every person, we could have so much more, but I want to use that opportunity to actually invite back Dina, Rabbi Rettenberg, and Karis to stay on the screen, knowing that there's so much more each of you could share with us. I want to just quickly go around and ask each one of you to share one last thought in a minute or so. What last thought do you want to make sure people leave here on? And then we'll do the same momentarily with Aviva and Hannah. So let's start. Let's start with Rabbi Rettenberg.
I just want to say again and again and again that abortion justice is a Jewish value in all of the ways, right? And abortion justice, right? Making sure that those who are most impacted are not only leading the movement and the work, but also are centered in all of the ways. And that we as Jews can be showing up for our families and for all of the teens in our lives and in our communities, and as a wider movement, as part of the Jewish community showing up now. And we can, and we are, and we will, and that's our work.
Amen. Thank you. Karis. Oh, you're muted.
That's just what so many teenagers wish they could do to our voices so often. A reminder, right, that that this population, teenagers have strengths that we didn't have. It was beautifully mentioned about naming. Teenagers are very good at naming things. If we had said abortion and used language back when we were fighting on this issue, things would be different. Young people now are not afraid to name their sexual orientation, at least in the progress that they're in, where they fit on this gender scale. So if they can use that strength to not be afraid to name. Once you name something, shame and visibility, the whole equation changes. And I think that we need to allow them to do that. The other is to validate, right, the magnitude that this isn't a quote unquote women's issue, it's a human rights issue, and invite everybody in to be a part of it. And the last part is to challenge parents to, again, try to be aware of your own narrative. Don't come from a place of fear, but to really treat your teen like the person you hope they become, rather than the person you're afraid they're going to become. And treat the world the same way. That try to enter and talk about the world the way that you wish it would be, rather than what you're afraid it's going to be.
Thank you. Dina.
I would challenge parents and any of the young people who are on this call today to remain critically hopeful. I think Dobbs coming down and Roe versus Wade being overturned has shown all of us that we should have never placed all of our trust blindly into institutions for our liberation, and that our liberation is really rooted in our capacity to take care of each other. And I think young people already know that. I see young people all the time on TikTok, of all places, talking about leaning into mutual aid efforts and mutuality. And that's what we're going to need now. Our institutions cannot save us. We know this, I know this. Many people have known this for decades, but in remaining critically hopeful, we'll be able to do the really hard work to get to the other side of freedom.
Thank you. Thank you all. And I just want to name one last question that came in the chat that I think is important to raise up. We've been talking about this from the standpoint, really, so much of the focus obviously is on teens and young people who can get pregnant and how this impacts them. But teens whose bodies make sperm, right? They are part of this conversation. They have fears and feelings as well, and also may need ways to feel like they have a space to name what that is and talk about it. So hopefully many of the things that we are talking about tonight also are resources for you with teens of all genders. I'm going to again thank you, Karis, Rabbi Rettenberg, Dina. If we can bring back Tamara, Aviva, and Hannah to close us out.
I just wanted to make a moment for Karis, because you're so good at talking to boys and with boys. And there are a lot of parents of boys who seem to be asking questions. So I did want to give you another moment from my moment to say something about how we talk to boys in this moment, those who care and those who don't care. And don't really see this as their issue or understand it.
I mean, the short version is,
yes,
boys are starving to get to be able to have a space to show up and be recognized for where they fit into this equation and be rewarded for doing so, rather than simply criticized for either being absent or not understanding. And there are a lot of very lonely people who do not own uteruses and create sperm and are trying to figure out how to navigate this. And as parents, especially if you have children of multiple genders or you simply have a male identifying child, it is so important that this conversation happen just as much as it would with any of your children. Think that we need the language and the empowerment to include everybody. I mean, Dina was so beautiful about this idea of liberation being our ability to take care of each other. That's what this is about, right? And again, and if you go to my website, I have a phone number that teens can call or text 24 hours a day. And if people are looking for resources or groups around all genders to talk about this subject, I have amazing teen facilitators of all genders who are extremely adept at having these conversations that if anybody would like to help or volunteer their children.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Tamara.
you. Yeah, so Aviva and Hannah, I want to give you an opportunity for you to say a last charge to all of us who are here tonight as we close.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to thank you all for including us into this conversation because, like we talked about, we're so often left out. And I just think it's really important for parents to talk to their children of all genders about birth control, and because we learn about it in school, but I guess not all states teach about it in the way that mine does. But I think at home, it's really important to be talked about too. So even if it's awkward and uncomfortable, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know that we need to know. And this, goes to all genders. So again, thank you so much for including us.
To add to Aviva, who said everything perfectly, might I add. Yes, thank you again for incorporating teens into the discussion about teens, because that doesn't happen as often as you'd expect. Considering we can't vote, it's you guys that we have to count on. And that's where I want to end it, where voting in the upcoming election is one of the most crucial things to changing what's going on.
Thank you both so much. Yes, we need to have these conversations led by you, and also really led by every single one of you. We deeply appreciate all the ways that you've helped us take a step back and think about this moment and our sense of our responsibility as educators, as parents, as Jews, as citizens, to our own kids and to kids that we don't know, to kids in other states. And to hold all of that is really what we're about. Thank you. Thank you for helping us hold it. And Dina, for naming the hope and the not being dependent on the external institutions, but on the changes and the community that we can build with one another. May we all continue to build it together from that source of hope. So thank you everybody for coming tonight. We're going to put a link to a very quick evaluation in the chat. We really do appreciate your feedback. And we are going to be sending all the resources that have been in the chat and more resources out to you in the coming days. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having those conversations and doing more listening than talk. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
You, Alicia, too.